It's just such a privilege to again welcome Mort Subotnick. He's a venerated and valued term in the broad household of electronic and sound music, as we all know. Influential presence at the dawn of synthesizers, working with Don Buchla at the San Francisco King Music Center and beyond to design the first iteration of voltage-controlled modular systems. He's perhaps the first person to really give this instrument its proper voice and its proper sound in is his first album, Silver Apples of the Moon on None Such, a record that inspired all of us. I was a kid back then. I found it at a department store in Porter Square, just a few miles from here, and it changed my life. That was an album that I was never the same after I heard it. And I dedicated a big swath of my life afterward to building synthesizers. That's why I'm here at the Media Lab now. And I guess I'm one of Mort's unknown children, as he called them yesterday. A lot of us are. He kept on evolving and growing, though, getting into digital music at the dawn of MIDI. His seminal piece, Key to Songs, was made here at the Media Lab in Barry Vercoe's studio. At least a large part of it, at least was. Working with, he went on to work with Interactive Systems to teach kids music, and he's still performing new pieces at the age of 92. Inspiration by all of us, still. So with all of this, it's again an honor and a pleasure to welcome Mort back to MIT into the Media Lab. He'll talk for a little bit today. Hopefully it's time for Q&A after. I'm sure there'll be some, so stick around. And he gives a concert tomorrow in Barco's Theater in the other building downstairs at 7 p.m. Thank you. Go ahead, Mort.
I'm going to have to be turning my head to see you all. But the lights are pretty light, so I'm going to have a trouble. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I can hardly hear me. Sorry.
We're trying to get lost.
Yeah, it's the examiner. It's the projector, so it's all right. I'll keep my eyes closed. I only see out of one eye anyway, so it won't bother. But my wife is having to get a doctor's letter because she's supposed to go on one of these court cases, and it's okay if I go away, but it's not okay if she goes away, because when I get there, that happens. Anyone here in 92? And I can give you some warnings. So what I'd like to do today is do a kind of catch up on what caused Silver Apples and my whole thing to happen, and what I got wrong and why. And it should be pretty loose. You can interrupt me or whatever you want to do, but I'll try to leave enough time to really have a conversation with you. So I would just want to go through a couple of things. I am doing a memoir, which was started at MIT, actually. It was going to be a total memoir, and it went on for years, and it was eventually, we'll go into details, but it eventually stopped after about 5 years. So back and forth, and we were going down the wrong thing. It was turning into an autobiography, and it needed more of a center. And the center now is going to be published by the NYU press, because most of what happened in the making of Silver Apples of the Moon happened when I was at NYU. It's a visiting artist for a 3-year period. So what I'd like to do is give you a quick, in the introductions, I get all this credit for all this wonderful thinking and doing and everything. But actually, in actual life, everything was a mistake. from the beginning to the end. And I'd like to give you a little bit of that because it's easy. I don't want to talk about other people because I don't want to compare myself, but I'll just start. I was a kid when I was a kid growing up. I'm really starting back. Um, I I was, I guess, about 4 years old, and we lived in um, a, the Jewish district of um, Los Angeles, which was a Jewish district, a black district, um, uh, um, because the words aren't coming, a Latino district, and people didn't get along very well. I called them a ghetto, but they're not ghettos because, well, not that's another story. There's places where people lived and they didn't get along very well. So when I was in kindergarten, I had li- we were talking mistakes now, um, and it'll go fast after I get this started, so you can get an idea of this. Uh, we didn't have television when I was 4 years old, but I did know Edgar Bourbon and Charlie McCarthy because he had a radio show. So, well, what is a radio show with a ventriloquist? I mean, it's pretty crazy notion. So I loved that show, and I knew that it was a doll, and he had a different voice, and he was talking, but I'd never seen it, so I didn't know he was throwing his voice. He was a ventriloquist, so I had my parents asked if I could get a Charlie McCarthy, and I did, and I would entertain the family talking, I'm just talking. I wasn't throwing in my voice. And then I made a little other voice and it made his mouth go up and down. And I talked in his voice and everyone thought it was funny. So, so school being the school where, people were taking out stretchers every day and it was an awful place, violent. And 4 years old, we were in kindergarten, and we got a show and tell. I'm sure you would know what a show and tell is. And so I brought my Charlie McCarthy, and it was a big hit. And my when I got home, my parents said that it was the principal called and wanted to know if you could bring the Charlie McCarthy back tomorrow, and they need you to do this again. And I said, fine. So they came in. I had put it in a locker when I came in, and they came down the three people came into the room. It was a big room, and two long tables with the kids sitting around. And this woman who was the principal, but I'd never met her. I mean, you don't meet people like that when you're in the kindergarten. And she had two bodyguards who were behind her, literally bodyguards. And she came in, and until the Korean War, when I was in the Army, I'd never heard this. It was the voice of command. Subotnick. And I raised my hand and she said, come here and get your Charlie McCarthy and follow me. So I didn't pee in my pants, but I sure felt like it. And I walked out, the two guards behind her. We got to Charlie McCarthy, and she didn't say a word until we got to up the stairs into a room. The noise was this crash, bang, boom. There was a substitute teacher in there, and they were killing each other. I mean, it was just horrible. They were throwing rocks and things, and she came in and she said, she said to them, got in front. She said, "You wait here and I'll call you in." She gets to the boiler room. She says, "Sit and be quiet." And then she pulls up a chair and she says, "Subotnick, here." And she sits me at this chair and she said, "He's going to entertain you. You're gonna listen to what he does here, and we'll be out in the hallway. And if I hear a peep out of you, we'll be in again." That's compassion. Us. And so it didn't bother me at all. I was just confused. And so I did my Tronica McCarthy, and the kids just loved it. They were applauding and whistling, and they were so happy. And so that was my first performance. Both mistake about it. Then the next one, and now we start going quickly. The next one was about 2 years later. We found out at that point, obviously, that I was good in poets somehow, and I don't know how, but the next couple of years later, probably 2 or 3 years later, um, the doctor, I was having a pulmonary problem of something like, I don't know what it was, and they didn't know either, but they thought maybe playing a wind, was coughing a lot, having a hard time breathing. And they thought playing a musical wind instrument might help that. So to make my long story much shorter, um, I we I didn't know the names of any instrument, but we had been to see Tommy Dorsey and in this wonderful trombone. But I didn't know it. My parents didn't know what the name of that instrument was. And so my mother gets a book that just doesn't describe the sounds or what it looks like, or how you play it. It describes how the name came about. So he had every instrument in the orchestra, and I had to figure out what this instrument was by the name and its derivation and where it occurred. I was in the middle of a I mean, looking back, it was the craziest nuts as it was crazy as the principal. And so it came about that the name Clarion came from the idea of calling out. It felt like that. And that belonged to an instrument called the clarinet. So I said, "I'd like the clarinet, and I'm really looking forward to getting it because I'm going to play it with a Lone Ranger." And I practiced an imaginary trombone, imagining I could play it. The instrument came and it was a clarinet, and it didn't look anything like a trombone. I had a reed and it had the mouthpiece and things to put together, and I didn't have a slight idea how to do it. So my mother looked at me and said, "You made a mistake." No, I didn't make a mistake. I'm going to play with this trombone. This is for it. I mean, with it, and then to collapse a little bit more, they gave me a teacher, and somehow within 3 months, the teacher came to the house and charged $2 or whatever it was at that time. And I know now that anyone that would come to the house for $2, even at that time, had to be a student. It was not a professional, teacher. And within 3 months, he told my mother I needed a new teacher. I played better than he did, and I worked hard. And that's something to push into here. If I was going to play the clarinet, I would learned it finally was, then I would have to do it be real at it. So I practiced, even as a kid, 7 years old, I practiced 2-3 hours a day. And within the first, I got a new teacher, and within the first less than a year, I was a virtuoso. I it was just I just played anything you put in front of me, I could play, and it was just simple. I mean, I didn't know what the big deal was, and so I got the clarinet by accident, became a virtuoso at it, became extremely well known. I was probably the youngest member of a symphony orchestra at 17. I had scholarships all over the place, and when I was getting ready to, just one more of these, and then we'll go real fast. Focus, I don't want to keep you forever. Don't worry. So, but I'm leading to Silver Apples in the Moon, of the Moon. I should say Silver Apples of the Moon started as a result of the Buchla, which started as a result of being in San Francisco at the right time and place, in addition to some other things. But so here I am. I'm in high school now. I have a big scholarship offered to me from USC, and we were going to visit. I'd never left Los Angeles, so we were getting ready to go to in my last year of high school to New York as a family for some family major event. And so I made arrangements to audition for Juilliard, and it was in the summer. So the Daniel Bonat, I don't know if you know at this point who he was, but he was a famous clarinetist at that point. He was playing. He was teaching at Juilliard. He was retired, and I knew his name, and so we got to Coney Island, where the family lived, and my dad loaned me the car, and I have no sense of direction, so this part of the story doesn't make sense to me. But I managed to get going to New York. I managed without GPS. I got to the Lincoln Tunnel. I drove through the Lincoln Tunnel. I made it to his house in Pennsylvania, his summer house. I played for him, and everything I played was wonderful. And he said he didn't need any more, and he would offer me. I could be accepted as a student at Juilliard, and I said, well, I needed. I don't. My parents have no money, so I'll need a scholarship, full scholarships. Everything was perfect, and so I'm putting my clarinet away, feeling, good. It's a nice thing that happened, and suddenly I had this feeling growing on me, which I get through my arms, and I can feel it now. And I turned to him and I said, "Mr. Bond, is there something you want to say?" He says, "Yes, my dear." He says, "My time is very valuable. I charge $10 an hour, and you've been here 45 minutes here. You owe me $7.50. And luckily, my dad had given me $10, and so I gave him the $10. He gave me $2.50 back, and I washed out feeling like so stupid. I didn't know you had to pay for an audition. It was cool. And I get into the car and I make it to the Lincoln Tunnel, and you can see how this is building. I mean, I'm not doing anything. I'm just going through and I'm like a puppet being led through this thing. And I get into the Lincoln Tunnel and the damn car stops. It doesn't go anywhere. It's not out of gas. It's not hot. It's just won't go. And so I have the police and half of New York yelling at me. I'm already feeling terrible about the thing. And I get out feeling like an ant that someone could step on. And I called my dad, and the car had just broke. I don't know I don't still to this day even know what happened to it. And so he came out with a cousin and drove me back, and I was sitting in the back seat. I was the size of a very large spider, uh, sitting in the back seat. I felt so stupid. And about halfway down, I thought, I don't care if did make a mistake. I am stupid, but it's wrong. It's just plain wrong that he didn't tell me it was going to cost me $10 or $10 an hour or any of that. And if that's the way music is to him, that it was worth $7.50 to embarrass me or for me to play and get accepted, I'm not going. So I quit. I didn't take now you can see where this is going. By this accident, by this completely thing out of my hands, I made the decision not to go to New York, but to stay in Los Angeles and go to UNC. Now it starts to go. Um, I got my scholarship at USC was huge, but I had to work for it. So I had never studied in school and in high school. I just hated it. It was like being in prison. The bell rings and then you have to stand up and walk to go somewhere else. So I practiced the clarinet and I had begun to write music. In fact, I had read quite a bit of music in high school. And so I decided I would take the job. It was a job I would USC, but I passed all music the first day. So I had no music to take for a music degree. I could take anything I wanted. And I was taking graduate courses in philosophy and all. I was I was so happy with learning, but I was teaching, I was performing with a marching band. I had to fly to play dee dee da 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 da. In every city, the band, the the football team, I got to know them pretty well. They're nice guys, and I had been playing professionally in high school with the the um the the people playing in film music and things like that. And they took me under in fact, I got my orchestration put out. I wrote an orchestra piece and I put an orchestra together to play my music when I was growing up. And it was string quartets and things. And they said, you don't need to be at school. You need to go out and be a clarinetist. And so they arranged a an audition with the Denver Symphony. And I got the job. I think I was one of the early youngest people in the symphony orchestra. I think I had just turned 18 by that time. So I leave Los Angeles because they told me I should do it. I go to Denver because I got the audition. And in Denver, I meet people, and eventually, is the violist in the orchestra was also a visual painter. He took me to Central City on a weekend that were free, and it was the beginning of the whole beat movement in Denver. Most people don't realize that, and I didn't know it at the time. And there I met. I wrote a piece of music for the violist and his wife, and within 48 hours, somebody interesting would come to town, and the Central City was a ghost town, except in the summer, so there were only 50 people who lived there, and this painter had a big loft building and he loved to cook. So he cooked for everybody for 48 hours. He had a piano and I met these two artists. One of them was Jim Tenney, who was, you probably know who he is. And he was playing one of his first compositions on piano. And then Stan Brakhage, the filmmaker, who was also my age, who was the Morton Subotnick of films later in life. And we became the Three Musketeers. And from that point on, I hated playing in the symphony orchestra because it is so dumb and easy. I was so engaged with everything that I was going to I was going to Denver University to stay out of the army. It was during the Korean War. And because I had not done any reading when I was in high school, I felt I'm not going to major in music. So I majored in English literature and poetry and creative writing. And I did great in that, but I couldn't take courses that added up to getting out of freshman class. So in 3 years, the Army said, "We've had enough of this. You're drafted. You have to go to Korea." And did you see the documentary last night? Yeah, well, you saw what happened with that. And yes, so I won't go into that. But the result is the musicians union in Los Angeles had a deal with the Army that if we get the word out, if we decided to stay in the Army an extra 4 months, that we were guaranteed not to have to go to Korea, but to go to play in the Presidio band in San Francisco. And that's how I got to San Francisco. Very cultural, very determined, with absolutely no control over myself. And it was the beginning of the beginning of the whole movement. And my job was to play the Star Spangled Banner, and like I did at USC, and that's all we ever did. I mean, but the conductor didn't understand how to conduct. He was a wonderful guy. He was an enlisted guy. I just loved him. But he was the conductor, and if you don't know it, it's dee da dum bum 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 dee ba bum bum, and he started dee da dum bum, and the band they were always having trouble, so they asked if I could conduct it from the first chair. It was fun. It was really neat, but we didn't have anything to do, so it was an 8-hour a day job. So I got involved in playing new music in San Francisco. I wrote music at concerts. I became the musician, clarinetist, to play all the hardest music. So I got really well known in that 2-year period. I was a member of the San Francisco community. I had to go back. I got a fellowship at Mills College. But I was still a freshman. So I had to go back to Denver to finish my degree. It took about 6 to 9 months. They were on a quarter system, and I took over. I was reading a novel a week. It was really tough, but I got back, and I'm playing to make a living. I had 2 children. I had 1 child at that point, and I'm playing the clarinet to make a living, and I'm writing music, and I become aware of the whole technology that's about to happen through various ways. I'm not going to tell you. Not so good. Uh, and and there, I'm playing the Mozart clarinet concerto with the Marin Symphony across the bay from San Francisco. And at the end of the concert, the French one of the French horn players, a woman, asked me if I was driving back to San Francisco that she'd get a ride. And that was Pauline Oliveros. Of all the people in the world you would meet that way, they're never, I could give you a list of musicians and you'd never get it. Uh, and we, on the way back, we had a long drive and we talked and we found out that we were cousins, and musically and artistically. And then, so she got me invited to the conservatory where they were doing concerts every month or so of young people and their music, and got me invited to that. And there I met Ramon Senders, and the three of us, through a lot of stuff, ended up starting to San Francisco Bay Music Center. And Ramon and um, uh, I was then aware of all the stuff that would take me to this bay right now. And it's been that way just forever. So if anyone wants to say that I have wonderful vision about the future, it may be true, but it's certainly not right. So what I ended up with was a notion that the musical instrument is the let's see if I can find this. Yeah, this is a different one. You can see this. I don't know what you're looking at, but I have seen there's some animals here right in a hand. Here, yeah, okay. So the musical instrument, you can read this. I copied it. It's really quite interesting. And they found a bone flute 40,000 years ago that played, I'd have forgotten which one, but it plays when it has three balls, and it plays a pentatonic scale that is the same. It's not only that it's a pentatonic scale, but it's the same pentatonic scale that, as of the writing of this, which is 2 or 3 years ago, was the most played scale in music, in any music in any culture in the world, in jazz and all kinds of stuff. That didn't make sense. But then, how about this one? 60,000 years old ago, there was the same goddamn instrument that was made by the Neanderthals. They have genes to test this thing. So it wasn't a far cry that I thought, the musical instrument. And it makes sense. It makes sense because it comes through the ears, and music itself comes before language. Because the right hand, there's a wonderful book because it's titled the left hand reads, speaks, or I can't remember. The right brain speaks. The left brain speaks. The right brain laughs. And that has to do, if you could just hang on to that for a minute, because music isn't something you think. Thinking. I never thought I could think because I don't use words. And if you don't use words, you can't explain what you did. So that's part of the trouble here is trying to get that sense across. And it's an expression, it's the feel of something. You know it. You just know it. That's the right side of the brain. The left side explains it. And as soon as you do that, now there have been some examples. If you go, they test it. E, D, 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 D. What did you hear? A scale, a major scale, but you're not hearing it as music. It's in the left side of the brain. That's how you hear a scale. But if I go, D, 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 it jumps to the right. Because it's something. It's a different something. It's a laugh. Laughter is a really interesting thing. We don't know why we laugh. We don't know how we laugh. And people with split brains things can, one of the things they can't do is they can understand a joke, but they don't find it funny. They can't laugh at it. And that's the reason. Music belongs to laughing. I mean, that's not all funny. That's not what I mean. But I think you get what I'm talking about. And so here's if you don't believe me, here's the musician, anthropologist, archaeologist, I guess, playing the flute. You can hear that okay? Not bad for 80,000 years ago. Does it? Oh, I'm going to be moving rather quickly now. So, is there anything I left out where you're here? There are other elements that count. That we have. I'll just go right to it. If, in addition to music, of passing music down by the musicians, we also have a problem in that we don't hear the same thing. Because even though we're playing the same music, you'll hear it depending on your background very differently. And we have no way to know exactly what that is. And in addition, if that's not bad enough, what you see at the time you're doing it has an effect. Here's this dance with original music for. You hear that? Now here's that same music with Chopin. Now you could say the dance is exactly the same, but it doesn't feel like it. If you stop and move it to your left side of the brain, you can see it doing exactly. Many people do that. They look at it and they analyze it and they say, well, it's just so the same thing. But if you look at it as a whole, suddenly the bomb falls out. It's suddenly very, very different. And when you catch it, how many caught the sense of fluidity in the Chopin and the bombast of the other one? Did anyone not feel that? Good. We don't have to push that. So that there. Now when movies are farther. So I think I think that's far enough back because I'm going to go to the starting of the Buchla. So what the the I don't know what you would call it, but the bet was that music wasn't exactly what it seemed to be. That there was music that you knew about, and there was music you felt about that you just grabbed and made sense. So in practicing, you're on the left side of the brain, but when you're performing, you should be on the right side of the brain. So you see that the visual takes the part. So if a man is or a woman is going dong, that's very different than dong. Or if you just hear dong, if you see it and you so it's very mixed up. It's a very mixed up thing. I didn't realize that at the time. My thought was, and it turned out to be true, that if you get music taught to you 80,000 years ago, you're going to pass that on. You don't write it down because there was no notation for music for a long time. And that was only for memorizing, for learning the generalities. The first music notation wasn't specific. And so if your teacher plays it for you and you play it back, that's how you learn music. What happens? Well, it turns out that the music you hear before you're born is the music you're going to hear after you're born. And it passes genetically, not genetically, it passes it, but it's a cultural evolution that is very difficult to shift because once you're born, you can't shift it. If you're a musician in the if you a musician, I don't know what the music would sound like, but in the very different, isolated area of we always use the Amazon, suppose the Amazon, where you do that's a language. It's an actual language. They're not gonna even hear what we're saying. It'll be as crazy as what you do, and it takes a long time to overcome it. And because they get it so early, and then it works in that culture. If you didn't get it, you would be deaf or something, and you'd have a problem. So you get it in that culture, and it actually functions to when you get out to wipe out the other sounds that might be around because it functions to keep you alive, that you can communicate. The same thing happens with music. And so that's why it lasts so long. Music doesn't exist by itself. It exists because we make it. The cricket whippo, we hear the cricket do, it doesn't do. It's rubbing and it's hearing things way up high, and we're hearing higher than it. What we hear is not necessarily what it is from one person to the other. This is difficult. And studies have been made that although the genetics of the evolution and no, I'm sorry, the evolution, the cultural evolution is harder to break than biological evolution. Because all you need biological evolution, you get blue eyes or red eyes, is to marry someone different. But it doesn't matter who you marry in cultural difference because you're stuck with the same thing and you pass it on. And that $80,000, 80,000, don't worry, guys, 80,000 years is an example of that. It's not special. It's just the way it is. Now I've given too much time to this, so I'm going to move off of it. So I got to San Francisco without as way of the Army. And I landed in a place that was just booming with ready, almost waiting for me to come in. And let's see, that's the one I didn't work. Oh yeah, here. And I'm going to give you an example. Here's an oscillator. What my idea was that we could make a new music. I was after a new music, and that we could make the new music with technology, because we could make an instrument that was not a musical instrument, but an instrument that could make new musical instruments by building. I thought it could be done with computers, but we were very far away from and you needed real time, and I figured it was 10 years. It turned out to be at least 20 years before you could do anywhere close to that with a computer. And so this was an analog computer to make music. And so what it needed to do was the parameters of music. Well, you just saw the parameters of music are up for grabs. They really are. And here is the first thinking with all this thought, the left hand, the left brain, just thinking away. We came up with the first oscillator. This is the first module of an oscillator. And we can control everything, but with knobs. We control everything with knobs. And the only the voltage you got is to control the frequency, which seemed like an advance. And both of these could be done together. So you couldn't do one within the other. The only thing that is special about it is that we had frequency modulation coming in at this point. But in terms of a modern piece of thing, we thought we were being really ahead of our times. I'm going to give you an example. I think I can do that. Here is what it ended up to be. When I started working with this, I did Silver Apples with the original, but I kept notes and I kept giving Buchla things, and this is what that same module turned into in about I guess about 5 months. It's not this particular module, but it had all of these ingredients on it. First of all, you don't see that breakage. You have two separate oscillators, and everything has a control voltage on it, so you can control it from anything you wanted. I was giving him so much instruction. I said, we don't have a control over such and such. So he put control over such and such and send me a new module. And he said, we can't keep doing this. Or when you need a new one, that became the 200. But this is a version of the 200. And it's near. Here is a real digger. If you look at this one, it's makes you feel sick. You were so stupid. And it did more and still does more to 100 than most synthesizers ended up with. Here's the envelope generator. I discovered that the envelope generator has nothing to do. It's not called Mambo. I think it's an attack generator or something. What is that called? Yeah, it's called an attack generator. Now that's that social evolution working, because it's not there is such a thing as an attack generator, but it's an envelope. That's the nature of it. We didn't understand the nature of it. We were passing down by word of mouth, like more morons. And this is what that looked like. Where everything has an input and an output. It makes us look like a baby. And this change happened in it began to happen in the first 3 months. It took 2 years. I did Silver Apples and then the Wild Bull. And when I started Touch, he began to put this together as a new album. It was 1969. 1970 was Marble Touch, Sidewinders. I finished in 1971. And by 1971, we had the new, so it took 4 years to make a complete switch from the 100 to the 200. The 100 had changed a lot, but the 200. This is remarkable, and as I pointed out before when we started, there was a reason for that we weren't just stupid. I thought we were just stupid, but we weren't just stupid, really. We were just culturally damaged by our own civilization. And that just happened straight through everything. So, so the notion of the making of the Buchla itself, though it was a mistake to start with, in the process of doing that, I began to, in San Francisco, I became the music director of the Actors Workshop, the music director of Anna Halpern's dance company, and 2 more things to keep me busy. And we're back to mistakes again, or happenstance. I was very happy in San Francisco. I was doing great. I was playing with the San Francisco Symphony when I needed to make money, and the ballet orchestra, and anytime I wanted, I could make money on with a clarinet, so that was no problem. And the Actors Workshop, Herb Blau, I don't know if you would know who he is, but you should if you don't. He was a really great director, a very brilliant man, and he was going to do a production started in 1958. Yeah, 1958, and he wanted to his Buchla was a production of King Lear. He wanted to reshape the whole meaning of what a theater, what a drama is, and so he wanted the young people, the young people who were the most radical in their approach to each of the arts, and I was chosen for the music and for the costumes and that stuff, and for every different thing. He has the most art person in San Francisco, and the production. I decided to try. That was the first time I tried. I said, if you give me my on fee in advance, I'll use it to make the score, and it won't be an orchestra in the pit. It's going to be all electronic. And so I bought a Toujours tape recorder, 2-track tape recorder. It was evidently around the first time there was you can read this. It tells you. But around the first time that tape recorder could be bought that was reasonably good in 2 tracks. And I cut and spliced it, I recorded things, and I did it all with cutting tape. I learned from the John Barrio how to overlap tapes and use the scissors and cut to make a dimension, to cross-trade between 2 sounds. You take the 2 sounds and then you make a crossfade, and it could be any shape you wanted, and it made an envelope in the crossfade, and it pasted together. So the tape was full of tape, it would take forever. But the storm scene was made from the sound of the actor's voice, and it was in 1958-59, Quadrophonics, although there was no Quadrophonic at the time. I placed, there was stereo, so I did a bunch of stereo mixes that would go to various places, and then brought it to the company. The company refused to go on the stage when my music would have been played. They just hated it. And then we didn't know what was going to happen. Herb didn't understand what I was doing either, except that it was wild, and he allowed it to go. And the review on the papers said that it was one of the great successes of modern theater. And then everybody loved me. It was great. It was a wonderful turnaround. We get that. Anyway, that and after, just when we got the Buchla done, it was 1965. The Buchla was finished because we didn't have $500. It was 2 years to get $500 for parts, and we finally got it. And then we're not in New York, we're over. This is Boston. And the Lincoln Center theater was opening. I forgot the name of this. They were opening, and they wanted the most adventuresome theater in the world, and so they chose the theater, and I got invited to come to New York. The moment that the Buchla was finished in San Francisco, so I only got to see the Buchla and maybe touch it a few times because I decided to go to New York, and they would buy me my own Buchla and give me a place to work. Because if I was coming, I had earned my salary at the time was $4,400, and that was the most I ever earned in San Francisco. And they offered me $5,000 to go to be the director of the theater, music director of the theater. But that was a part-time job. And so the NYU came through with my studio and everything. It's the Tisch School. I was the first member of the Tisch School, and put me on Bleecker Streets. And that's how I earned $10,000 instead of $4,400. And I felt so greedy that I gave up my Saturdays to teach 4 kids. One of them was Reese Chatham, became a real art composer. Anyway, it started the kitchen. It was amazing. And that's all. Nothing is planned. Is there any place in this? The only planning I did was wrong. And it's still going that way. And I'm here because I was wrong about everything. And it, I thought it could all be on a computer, but it couldn't. It actually couldn't. At first I thought we were working for music for um, we were working on music for the 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 this out of the message of the medium is the message. The message of the medium was the record. The record that whole thing with Silver Apples was a record, and I wasn't satisfied until 1971, I think it was, when I did a Sky of Cloud with Sulfurs. And that to me finished the record. The records were finished by then. They were in CDs, and they went to, where they went. But I couldn't move it to the stage to perform because I would need a stage full of equipment to be able to do what I had done for a record. And so I thought maybe the computer is there. And then I tried 3 or 4 times over a period of time. And it wasn't really until about 5 years ago that the computer has now been capable. What I will play tomorrow night is it's got 20 oscillators, but everything is in Ableton. And that was a mistake too, that I got involved with Ableton. I didn't know about it. And it turned out this thing knew me, but I didn't know that. And I went a long time before I realized what a good program that was. And then they began to listen to me about it. We could talk about that if you want, but added things. But that I think is enough. And I would like to open it to anyone who wants to add the question. I can't guarantee I can answer it, but I can ask.
I've had the privilege of talking to Mort several occasions over the last years at NYU years ago, preparing for today. There are always more stories. It's incredible. There are always more stories, Martin. It's so amazing to hear both your observations, your past, your bits of wisdom, how it all meets together. It's just wonderful. So
That's because of Cooper. Here's Fritz.
anyway, let's open the floor. So questions from Mort. Yeah, okay. This is better. Let's get somebody. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead in the back.
Hi, yeah, I'm Yves Contry with the Amassing Spatial Sound Lab. I would have questions about Quadrophonics.
Great question.
Why Quadrophonic, and is there something special about quadrophonic or multi-channel music for you?
Yes, there is. In the very beginning, there was, even though I only had a stereo tape recorder, I was working with the idea that the parameters of music, the pitch, time thing, needed also space. The space should be that was the very beginning. And I used stereo in not placement, but it was a dynamic of music. And with touch, Columbia Records, so the Nonsuch did Silver Apples and the Wild Bull, but Touch tried to get Silver Apples, but Nonsuch came. It was a wonderful story too. It was a mistake, but Nutset was a small company, and they wished me well, and I went with Columbia Records, and they had I don't know if you know about this, but they had a quadrophonic long playing record LP machine. It was quite remarkable, and they commissioned my first work for them. Who asked the question?
I am here. Oh, you're down. So let's get you sound matters mix.
Okay,
I'll sit up here.
and so they decided to commission my first record to be a quadrophonic record. They gave me a 4-track tape recorder. In fact, 2 of them of Ampex. That was my first 4-track, and then that it just made sense to them, and it probably was the only piece that didn't just place musicians in a different place in the room, but actually the music itself was placed through the room. And if you listen to the record and you hear there's a CD of the quad version for them on CD, you'll hear there's a wonderful spot about 2/3 of the way through where I put the music on a spin, and it spins like with a high pitch, goes and it only happens once in the piece, and so it was thought of. I think like if you just think about it for a minute, no one would have placed a parameter in terms of space, but it is important. It's if something gets louder, it means it's closer, right? And if it's closer and softer, it's a whole different experience. It's a different thing to laugh about. So anyway, I hope that answers the question.
Thank you so much. It's so it's released in surround sound. It's the DVD.
Say it again.
Is it released in surround sound, a CD version? Okay, so you can listen to it on a surround system.
We have SPLP and
That's great. The later albums you recorded in multi-track, those could be remixed for surround as well. Is there any plan to do that? You're very much about spatial sound.
Yeah. Well, I think all of them are. I think I did them all in quad. They may have got them released in stereo.
So even Silver Apples, the old records you haven't seen.
What stereo? Silver Apples is stereo. The Albo is stereo, and Touch is surround. And I think from that point on, I think they had 4-track tape required. Or
Highline Score as well. Also,
which ones?
Highline.
Yeah, that's the next one after.
Better.
Right. Sidewinder is definitely 4-track. They're all on the light mode label. You need a CD-ROM. You can't do it on a CD. The CDs are only, but it's a CD-ROM, and the whole group is on Mode Records.
More questions from Mort? Maybe I'll ask one quick while we wait. In Silver Apples, we talk about it a bit during the last day or so. It's got these beautiful atmospheric, soundscapes, but then you get into a really hard, I wouldn't say rocking rhythm, but it's a groove or a strong groove in it. Are you using a sequencer?
Yes. The idea of the sequencer is a good question. The idea of the sequencer was, I have pictures of it, but the sequencer was a part of the notion of we had keyboard. The keyboards weren't 12 keys as Don did, since we couldn't sync it together anymore. He made them more, but they were 16 keys, and there were 16 knobs and on the sequencers. And the basic notion, we're living in caves that guy, you know, we're those cave people. And so we're getting our notions not from not knowledge because there's nothing out there to have knowledge to. So we're getting a feel for what is necessary. So I decided what was necessary is to be able to make music and have a sequence where each position had a different pitch, different whatever, and you could float it through at any speed or tempo or rhythm. And then you would have a secondary thing, which was a keyboard, a so-called keyboard, touch plate keyboard of 16 positions for um, um, for free access to any place you want at any time in that array of 16. And so between the 16 keys and the 16 channels of it, you could, and then we began to play. This is just play. Then it was like we had it figured out. We were playing with it with our right brains and moving back and forth. And so in playing with it, we realized you could start a sequencer somewhere from the random access. And if you had a couple of them, you just kept building until the whole thing. But what it wasn't was a straight. I mean, you could make at the beginning we do this, but when I got, I'll speed this up a little bit. Then when I was started to work on Silver Apples, I had no idea. Now you got it. You got a studio. You got more money than you need to live on. You could give up the clarinet, which I did, and I did that. I told the post office to send my clarinet by way of Suez Canal so it wouldn't get to New York too soon, so they could forget it. And so as I begin big shot, I mean, I'm gonna make a new piece of music that is just, and my mouth opens. It's like Biden in that terrible shit. Yeah, I didn't know what to do. What is a new piece of music? For Christ's sake, I couldn't figure it out. And now that's what I gave you at the beginning. Now I wasn't so stupid. It doesn't exist. It's not in your mind. I'm going to say this once again, and don't let me leave the subject because I'll get to you. It'll go. Remember the beginning of Silver Apples. If I ask you, do you know what infinity is? Everybody could say yes. It means this. If that's the left side going. Put your right side on it, and you can't do it. And that was what happened. I'm starting to. I'm going to be the big starter of this, and I didn't know what to do. So I went and I said, okay, let's go to the parameters. I know they exist. So I'm going to work with just pitch. Forget scales. And then there's no rhyme or reason to these. And I improvised there are two kinds of pitches. One are stable pitches. Da, da, do, oh. Doesn't matter what the pitch was, but they're stable. Once they go, they give you a pitch, a frequency. And then there are the gushy ones. So I did an improvisation on with Mighty. I had two track tape recorders. One recorded it and played back, and one only recorded. One only played back. So I would record an improvisation with gushy pitches, not knowing what I was going to do with it. A whole tape full 30 minutes. And they were 2 minutes long, 1 minute long, 10 seconds, 2 minutes. And I'm going to tell you the details now, because it took me 11 months to do this. I took paper leader tape and sealed off and wrote the date and time. Pushy 1. And then the next one would get in the next. So I had 30 minutes of maybe 40, maybe 20, I don't know how many things that were all, because those paper leaders, you could write on it. And I put that aside, and I had the Buchla on for 2 weeks while I'm working on it, because I could never get the same thing twice if I changed the patch. And so I got that done, and then I took all the cat scores out, put them in, and a new patch that did pitches. And these pitches were tiny differences in pitch, one after another, in different areas, with no sense of scale or anything, and did the same thing with that. Then I would take the 2 tracks of, I would choose number 7 of one and number 2 of the other, put them on the tape recorders and play back, and then they would get mixed down to a single track, to a single stereo. And while it's doing that, I could actually improvise against it. I didn't figure that out until later, but you end up with an array of 2-track stuff that are going to be in a piece together, and they were going to be the first section of the piece. So that is what that turned out to be, the first section. And I did the whole. It takes forever. It took 11 months. It took 11 months because that's when it was due. I had to say, I guess I'm done. And then the second side, and then it went on from there. One thing led to another. And the metaphor for the first side was sitting in a train, going on a trip. You know why I was going on a trip. And I did take drugs, but I didn't need to. And so it was the idea of putting a larger thing together was you're on a train and it's going a long distance and you're sitting first class next to a window and you see, you're in a desert, and then you go to sleep and you wake up and you're in the forest, and then you go on, you're in a city. So the idea, because I had imagined that you could put the needle, could start anywhere on the record you wanted, and you could take it up and down and move it around. So it only has a beginning and an end, because that's what I did. But it doesn't really have a beginning and an end. In the sense, the second side, which is not the first side, and not the second side, the other side, because I didn't know you could start with either side of the record, was going to be about what, if not pitch, time. So then we had different kinds of time, and that's why you have, at one point, you have, I got a I forgot the word. There's a word for it, but it's left my brain. Anyway, it's a musical term that means boogie woogie has it. It just goes. It's like and they have it in classical music as well. And Bach has beautiful ones that are 4 or 5 minutes long, and then they just keep repeating. And you play a melody over the top of it. Asperiamo. Could anyone give me the name?
Ostinato.
Pardon?
Ostinato.
Ostinato. There you go. And so I got stuck on the ostinato because I got this groove going, and with 4 positions, 5 positions, but buddy boom, buddy boom, buddy boom. It's not quite that even, but that was the timing of this 5 notes, and then I made against a sequence of notes that are just flying all over the place. So the one is scalar, or well, they're 2 different things. The 2 different things you could do. One is you can keep it solid, it had 2 things like the pitch is that, and or you could make it just go crazy. And so I had then another track I would go crazy. So what I did is I then, in a different technique, what I did is the ostinato was 7 beats long, and I made the 16 at the same tempo, but it would constantly change in the number of notes against it, and they always be in an odd number, so that you get 7 against 11, and then 7 against 13, 7 against 17, and so forth and so on. I used 2 more sequencers, so nothing matches, but they've got this but they sound like they're the same. They're the same tempo, but they're not. They don't sync in any way. And so instead of doing 2 different ones, I did 1 long one. And strangely enough, it took the longest to do that of anything.
It's using the automatic tool, using the sequence.
Or
Using the sequencer, not splicing. They're using the sequencer.
yeah,
It took the longest.
yeah.
Now, you hung out with Terry Riley and Steve Wright in the early days of the Tate Music Center. Was that what you guys talked about? Just they're all doing versions of this.
No.
So you guys just developed it on your own.
Yeah, we were doing wild concerts, and Terry was coming back. This was the beginning of what was it? It was not Dada. It was the '60s version of Dada. Pardon?
Lobsters?
Fluxes. Yeah. Who said that? Mule's got. Yeah, fluxes. And this was the beginnings of fluxes, and Terry went to get his ideas of fluxes. He was a close friend of Lamont Young's. Lamont got involved, and he decided he didn't want to be involved, and he was coming back, and so we commissioned him. We had played everybody in San Francisco, including ourselves, but we were getting to be known as, worldwide. So we decided we'd do 1 season where we would dedicate a concert to local composers, and Terry was coming back, and he was going to arrive in November 1964. How's that for 92? Oh, so we said, Ramon, neither one of us remember who said it, but we said, Ramon and I told him, why don't you write a piece that we can all play? So, sitting on the airplane, he wrote a piece in C. What could be easier than C? That was the beginnings of that. What we did do together, we did compose together. each person had his own thing. Steve Rice had a performance that same season, and I think it was the first polo performance at the Pendulum, and the earliest of the I forgot the name of that group too. What is that?
Lexus?
No, Steve Rice, Full Glass, minimalism. That's what it's called. It's not actually minimal. It's just, in any way, you all know what that is. And the first performance, I think, was done at the Tape Center. Phil Glass was a couple years later, but Steve started with a very hardcore notion of this putting things against each other that way. And everybody did their own thing. What Scar Rain, that was one of the first ones, and so he wrote something like someone. I mean, Pauline did another thing, and everybody did their own thing. If you didn't do your own thing, you didn't get a performance. I mean, it just didn't make any sense for me to do this and for someone else to do this too. That doesn't add up somehow. We were all trying to do what I was trying to do, which was to do a new thing that was important. It was not it wasn't a fugue or a symphony or anything like that. It was a new thing. So all the evenings were of a new thing. There are billions of stories, so you don't know what we start. But a lot of it is going to be in the memoir, which is now going to be published. I have a publisher that we're going to start working on it next week. So it's going to be about a year, but it'll come out.
Just look forward to that. How are you building up? Do you want to go one more question?
I could go forever. Don't go by my thing. I just go. I might die. Here, I'll still.
The silver apples of the moon, the golden apples of the sun. Can you please tell us a little bit more about what inspired Subotnick to make artwork and sonics that were always way ahead of their times?
Well, so I didn't have a title. I searched through the piece, and I had 11 months to do it. I'm going to tell you this, but I'm going to tell you another one after this. I didn't have a title for it. I mean, I told you my thinking about it. That's real, about pictures of this and that, the next thing. And I thought it was maybe a trip, on a train. I didn't know what it was. A young guy, and he was really young because he was young to me then, was in the physics or I don't know what he was doing, but science program at NYU, undergraduate. And people, the tape center, my studio in Bleecker Street was like a magnet. People really, literally would come in from outside and they would just seat themselves down. And some of them became part of the studio and some didn't. And he became part of this. I gave them a couple of hours a week if they would clean up or do something at the studio. And he was a big help because he knew science. I didn't know any science. And he came in one day, he said, I have a title for your piece. And he gave me the two, you know the name of the piece? It's a poem, and I forgot, it's the journey, someone's journey. And the journey was my journey was not only a trip, but trying to find what is new. And when I came to silver apples of the moon, golden apples of the sun, it just seemed right. And then, so we used it. That's what he came. It wasn't inspired by it, but the music inspired me to like those two lines, and the quest that was involved.
Zebi, yeah.
Oh, I wanted to tell you quickly, if you have an extra 4 minutes, or how the commission came from Silver Apples. I went to New York, as I said, because of the company, the Vivian Beaumont and NYU Robbie, and I almost didn't go because we had been given a $200,000 grant from the Guggenheim, not at the Guggenheim, Rockefeller Foundation, for the tape center to become a real thing. Real thing meant that we could do whatever we wanted, and we got to move to a school. I was all going to that because we were not allowed to handle that much money, but we could have gone on, and in fact, it did go on at Mills College. It stayed until Mills College closed just recently. But I have this dream of a new music, and that I should offer it. My guide in life came when I was 8 years old, and I decided what you should do is did I tell you that? You should do what you do best and do it the very best you can, and share it. That's the guide for being a human being. And so at this point, I realized I had gotten a lot of success with my thinking and the music that I was doing with electronics, and I thought the world could live without a clarinet. And it could even live without my orchestral music or instrumental music. I'll keep all that away and move over to technology. But I had to know that I had an aptitude, so I did this concert and they got all these reviews, and I decided it was there. And I realized going to New York, I could have stayed in San Francisco. Silver Apples would never have happened because I could have made the piece, but it would never be published. I figured if I'm going to get this out and take the second part of my guide in life, that I have to share it. It may never be shared, but it's not going to be shared if it's in San Francisco. New York is the place it needs to be. And so I'm in New York without a commission to do it, but working on it and giving lectures. As you noticed, I'd like to talk, and that's been forever. So I gave lectures about what we're talking about. Some of the height and sounded like this. And I worked all night because of a lot of stuff, but I like to work all night, and people would just come into the studio. The rock bands were all playing, and they were coming in. And at 2:00 in the morning, it was a good time. That's when they stopped, and they would just come in and sit and listen and have. I can give you a 10-second version of a very important discussion between two of the rock stars. That's it. And so I never got to meet any of them. They just came in and listened. And one night, at 2:00 in the morning, comes in this guy, and he's wearing all the red clothes, wearing Levi jacket, Levi pants, except the pants are pleated. They've gone to the cleaners. And he comes in, and I've got a picture of him in here, but I'm not going to go back. He comes in, and he gives me my lecture. The whole lecture about how a record is the right place for new music. The electronic music in form should be a record, and forget about playing Mozart, Beethoven. And he said, and I'm the head of a record company, and I was looking for someone who can do this, and everyone says you can do it. And we'll offer you $500 for it. I looked at him, and I came at him. I must have looked like I was going to kill him, but I wasn't. I was going to turn him around and send him home, and I did. And he goes home, and I get up to get the kids off to school in the morning, and I put my my record on of the Brandenburg Conserve to give me so that I could get the kids up and get them bricks that act like a human being. And I look in this none such records, and that's what he said his record company was. And so I tried to call them all day, and I couldn't find a phone number for them. So I go back to work that night thinking, really thinking, I really blew it. I mean, here it was. I sacrificed San Francisco for it, and the thing comes to me, and I crawl out. And so 2:00 in the morning arrives again, and ultraviolet from the Andy Warhol group was sitting on the sofa doing the serious talking of I remember I could see some pretty and he comes in the second time, and I'm coming at him because I'm going to go on my knees and say, I'll do it for nothing. And he grabs me and pushes me back and said, don't come near me. He said, we've changed our mind. We've decided to give you $1,000. And I said, I'll take it. And I didn't see him again. He came out, we talked on the phone, but it was this major hit, and as you all know, and I didn't really talk to him again until they were doing the documentary on me. You saw him in the documentary, yeah, that's where it is. And that's
Jack.
I asked him those questions because I wanted to make sure I wasn't making this up, so I didn't put those thoughts in his head. I asked the question, and he gave me all the answers exactly right. And he had never known that I was going to. That I didn't realize until the interview that he thought this was a true story. That I took it for $1,000. I think that was what it was, wasn't it? Something like that. Anyway, that's another. It's really a funny line. It just falls. I just feel like I should have used the word fall because I'm trying not to fall, but it's not. I'm not doing anything. I've been talking since I'm 4 years old.
But you're doing the right thing. You happen to be in the right place, right? If you didn't do the right thing, it wouldn't have happened. So.
Yeah, but the right place is an accident too. But I make fun of this, but it's actually the right side, left side. I'm a very right-sided person. I know jokes. I can tell jokes, and people come to me. They came to me to learn to play the clarinet. They came to me to learn to do things, but it's all very right-sided. I understand that really well, and I have enough facility with the left side to make sense out of it. But the right side doesn't have no sense. It really knows. It's just that it's the left side that articulates it. So it's a very quick move back and forth between them. Now my brain is going to stop, but I sense the resonance of thinking. I've told people, and I really mean it. I cannot think. I don't know what it means. And I don't know that I ever have. I'll give you one example of it, and then I promise to stop. Yeah, how do I do this? I got the idea. I mentioned that the meaning of life. I got it from Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher. When I was, he was the object from his book, and that was stashed away in my parents' room. He said, I am a philosopher. That's what I am. And a philosopher tells people, philosophizes, and gives them things. It's who I am and what I am. I am that. And if I were told, you will die if if you don't allow us to cut your beard off, he said, go ahead and cut my beard off. I'll be good. I'll die. And that gave me the idea of what I said, of it. You should do what you do it as well as you can, and share it. Do you get that from that story? Honestly. Does anyone get it from that story? When I go back and think about it, I don't get it. Where did I get it from? And then it was just the other night. I was literally 2 nights ago, the night before I came here, I remembered as I had a dream. My father used to go, if I can't do it, and those walk. You would say that. You would say, somebody just invented a blah, blah, blah. And you'd go, like that. And I thought of that a long time ago. And suddenly I understood the Epictetus. My father didn't have that. Epictetus had it. I know what to do. And I'm going to do it. And if I don't do it, I'm not really alive. It was something that bothered me about my father all the time, because he'd always say, and maybe that's why I always carried through with things. He'd always go, I thought of that. It's like it's not worth anything. Makes me feel bad just to say that. But that's how my thinking is. That was Christ, 85, 86 years ago, that I lived that so the sound came and gave me the ability of my left brain to understand what I got from my right brain, with the Epictetus, because he didn't say what I said, and it came from that, and that was a jumble between the right and left brain that emerged this thing. So what happens with that kind of thinking, I think what happens is that you get it with the brain working together, but you don't have it in your left brain so that you can't say it. I mean, I had it all these times. It's like your unconscious says to you, for Christ's sake, you came from your dad. He went, and he did the opposite of what that was. That's simple. And then you wake up and you can't remember. But you suddenly know for sure. Doesn't make any sense? Not all.
Morton, now I know why the sound, I can't do it. When that sound is in all your records. That's how it came from. It's deep in your psyche. You're bringing it back into your...
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. You did it so well. And
I gotta because I'm gonna keep you guys.
we should listen to you all night, but I think you've been a couple hours, so I think we'll close it now. Thanks everybody for coming. Mort might be here for some minutes before we clear out, but come by, say hi. Thank you so much. Good to you guys.
This is supposed to be a lead into As I Live and Breathe, and I never even talk about it.
Concert on Saturday tomorrow at 7. So you will be here for